Neverwinter Nights needs about as much introduction as the Queen at the Royal Palace. I don't even know what the odds of that are. If you couldn't tell, I recorded this a while ago. Rest in peace. I'm just... I can't believe this happened. Offer's stupid intro line. Alright, whatever. Back to the video. Originally released in 2002 by BioWare and played in 3rd edition Dungeons & Dragons, Neverwinter Nights helped to usher in a new era of gaming for D&D. Outside of the following release of Icewind Dale 2, it signaled the effective retirement of the Infinity Engine, which is what classics like Baldur's Gate and Planescape Torment were played on. In a lot of ways, Neverwinter Nights was as much a sandbox program as it was an actual game. It shipped with what's called the Aurora toolset, which allows players to create their own campaigns, whether they be for single-player or online play. At the time of its release, these sorts of tools were absolutely groundbreaking. The fact that people could create their own persistent worlds to play in with their friends was really unlike anything else that was on the market. The Aurora toolset and what it has allowed players to do is largely why Neverwinter Nights has maintained such a following, even 2 decades after its original release. There are still a number of persistent worlds online today, and with the release of the Enhanced Edition back in 2018, many of the classic, renowned user-created adventures were included in the game proper. There were also some other mod packs released for the game that I'm not allowed to talk about on YouTube. See, the importance of user-generated content to the success of Neverwinter Nights is very easily understated, and that's because the game's original story, titled The Wailing Death, was not exactly great. It's not an offensively bad experience or anything like that, but it's overly long, lacking in memorable characters, and generally underwhelming, especially when compared to BioWare's previous offerings. The game's 2 expansions, The Shadows of Undrentide and Hordes of the Underdark, both released just months apart in 2003, do most of the heavy lifting for those interested in an official narrative experience. After the release of those 2 expansions, BioWare shifted towards releasing what they called premium modules, effectively smaller expansion packs that were sold at suitably lower prices. They only released a few of them before stopping production, which I have to imagine had something to do with the fact that when you have an entire community making fully fleshed out adventures for free, you don't really need any paid releases from the developers. One of the planned BioWare releases, Darkness over Daggerford, was actually released unofficially by the programmers after it was initially cancelled. The Enhanced Edition has seen the release of a few new premium modules as well. The first of these adventures was entitled Kingmaker, released in 2004. Kingmaker is actually made up of 3 separate, unrelated adventures: the eponymous campaign, Shadowguard, and The Witch's Wake. Each is set in a unique world with individual level caps and gameplay styles. Now, originally this video was going to be something of a retrospect of all 3 campaigns, but as I realized after I played through them, Shadowguard and Witch's Wake are really short. There's nothing necessarily wrong with them, but there's also just not a whole lot going on. Witch's Wake in particular is basically a prologue for another module that never got made, if the internet is to be believed, amounting to hardly anything more than some basic combat and some cliffhangers that you obviously never get any resolution to. Shadowguard is a bit better, but not by much. In the case of both, I felt like I had spent more time creating my character than actually playing the game. And in a way I sincerely didn't expect, I was pretty surprised by how good Kingmaker was. I'd be lying if I said I hadn't set my expectations somewhat low before going into these modules, but Kingmaker, with its more fleshed out world and characters, managed to provide an earnestly enjoyable experience. The player takes on the role of a member of a group of misfits that includes a flaming dwarf, a rakshasa, a were-rat, and a death-seeking fae. The group descends on the keep of Cyan, seeking to aid the fortress as it is waylaid by a group of orcs, goblins, and other evil bastards. By the time the player makes their way into the keep proper, their heroic deeds earn them quite a bit of fanfare, which leads to them becoming a candidate for the upcoming election to become the Lord of Cyan. Yeah, it all moves a bit fast, but I think you get the premise. The election is decided by the 9 guilds that reside in the city, and you've got to convince enough of them to vote for you over the keep's effective head of military and a lecherous but wealthy and well-connected noble. Along the way, you're aided by members of your old gang, as well as an omnipresent voice that knows a whole lot about you, but refuses to ever tell you anything. Kingmaker presents both your classic D&D style combat, played within Neverwinter Nights' well-renowned adaptation of 3rd edition, and numerous opportunities for more fine-tuned role-playing. In comparison to its shorter step-siblings, there is a real dedication to creating more of a world here, even if said world outside the keep and its immediate surrounding areas is never specifically defined. Instead, you get a whole cast of characters, many of whom you begin doing quests for at one point or another, to sink your teeth into. Just about every character that you can initiate proper dialogue with has some sort of backstory or something to say about the current events of the keep, and the general commoners love telling you about whether or not they think you'll win the election. Considering that the keep is relatively small, making up 2 overworld maps, 3 if you include the outer gate area, there is a lot of activity packed into it. The NPCs, particularly the heads of the various guilds, each have unique personalities that play into what it takes to befriend them. Some take a very quick liking to you, while it takes a lot of work to earn the vote of others. The best aspects of these characters might be the fact that despite the small scale the module takes place on, BioWare didn't resort to odd, over-the-top characterizations in order to make up for the lack of time. Most of the NPCs that you come across are played very straight and are interesting off their own merits and backstories. That includes the former members of your group that you choose to have tag along with you for the long haul. Each of them have histories that they're happy to recant and will frequently comment on your surroundings and interject into conversations. Quests have different progressions in accordance with who's in your party as well, though they typically lead to the same outcome. They'll also react to how you play through the game, being quick to tell you whether or not they approve of your choices in certain situations. Speaking of choices, Kingmaker is loaded with them. Practically from the word go, the player is presented with a number of decisions that affect the course of the game. A lot of them are morally thorny, and typically revolve around how much guilt you're willing to have on your conscience. They open up plenty of opportunities for you to roleplay as your protagonist, regardless of their alignment. There is a good and evil option in nearly every situation, and oftentimes what's easier to do isn't necessarily the right thing. I can't really say much more without spoiling parts of the story, but this was one of the best parts of the game for me. A set of choices right at the beginning of the module might have been the best of them, as they legitimately had me wrestling with what I should do. The story is okay. It doesn't have any noteworthy twists or turns, with those that are there being pretty blatant, and it is pretty linear for the most part. I wouldn't say it goes as far as being railroaded, but there is very much a you are a person of destiny, so you have to do X, Y, and Z sort of vibe to a lot of it. There are a few places where you can inject some of your own backstory into your character, but unlike most of the other choices you make over the course of the game, it doesn't really do anything. You're still the hero running around with a seemingly magical voice telling you to win the election at the end of the day. I am willing to be a bit more lenient in this situation, however. Modules have to send you somewhere, and that typically means holding the player's hand a bit. If they had time to let you do whatever you want, well, they wouldn't exactly be modules at that point, would they? And Kingmaker does have time restraints on it in certain places. No matter what the player does, they only have so much time before the election, meaning they have to work quickly to get votes behind them before they are cast. There are some measures they can take to buy themselves a few extra days, but the ballots will be counted sooner rather than later. That means, for the most part, chances are you're unlikely to be able to accomplish everything in a single playthrough. You're only going to be able to do so many quests and court so many leaders. This actually, in a lot of ways, promotes replayability. As I said earlier, there are a lot of different paths for the player to take, and even in the playthrough for this video, I frequently found myself reloading just to see what the other outcomes were. Normally, I'm far from a fan of timed mechanics, but it works quite well here, largely in part due to the module's shorter length. You can go through the mod, realize what you missed out on and why, then turn around and correct it on another playthrough. One part that I really can't find any defense for is why combat is so easy. While Kingmaker starts at a lower level, there is a lot of experience to be earned, meaning that you'll progress in levels very quickly, while continuing to fight against nothing more than kobolds, goblins, and lesser undead. Even the final dungeon wasn't all that difficult. It's still fun, mind you, because this is still Neverwinter Nights, but a bit more of a challenge would have been greatly appreciated. I also really dislike that you can't rest in the dungeons themselves, which is infuriating when you have a party of spellcasters. And it's extra infuriating because you can just walk outside the entrance to rest there. Why? What sort of design is that? And it's just so weird that such an odd oversight would go unnoticed, because Kingmaker is a really polished experience all in all. The voice acting, of which there is a pleasant amount of, is superb. I never came across any noteworthy bugs, and the writing's a nice mix between dialogue and description. The entire experience took me about 5 hours to get through, on the shorter side of the advertised 5 to 8 hours of content, and that's with taking my time with conversations and consciously trying to accomplish as much as I could before the vote. I was a little disappointed that there wasn't more to do, but only in the sense that I had really started to enjoy my time in the keep, and I can appreciate that it's a shorter experience that manages to stay entertaining throughout. Something I've often bemoaned as I've grown older is that I simply don't have time to play through longer CRPGs anymore. I used to play through the Infinity Engine games frequently in my youth, and just simply can't make that sort of commitment to an adventure that long anymore. Hell, were it not for these videos, I don't know how many games I would play at all. Kingmaker is something I could have seen myself playing, and perhaps most importantly, paying the price for back in the day. I don't think I could really say the same for Shadowguard, even if it came with Witch's Wake for free. Considering that I'm pretty sure you would have to make a sincere effort to purchase a version of the game that doesn't include it at this point, seeing as the old Diamond Edition release and the new Enhanced Edition release both come with Kingmaker in its entirety, I don't see a whole lot of reason why you shouldn't try it either. If you're looking for something on the shorter side, or just something different than the norm, then Kingmaker is where you should look.